Since 2019, I have been using Zeapon sliders for all my YouTube videos and also some other jobs as well, starting from the manual Micro 2 and then the motorized Micro 2, Micro 2 Plus and recently the Micro 3. I don't use these sliders because I'm Zeapon's ambassador, it's the other way around. I am their ambassador because I love their sliders and find them very suitable to me. So Zeapon is releasing a new slider. This time it is not part of their Micro series, it's a new series called Access. In a lot of ways, this Access slider is completely opposite to the Micro series sliders. There are things I really like and make it probably the best slider from Zeapon. But there are also a few things that make me want to stay with the Micro 3 instead. So in this video, we will have a look at this new Access slider and see how it compares to my favorite slider, the Zeapon Micro 3. There are 3 different versions of the Access sliders. Access 80 is the shortest and it's the one that Zeapon sent me, so that's what I'm going to use in this video. There is a longer Access 100 and the Access 120. The difference between these 3 versions is really just the length and of course the price, but otherwise the design feature is pretty much the same for all these 3 sliders. There's also a Pro version for each of these. It's the same slider but just with additional accessories. I will talk about the Pro version a little bit later on in this video as well. Zeapon's Micro 2 and Micro 3 sliders are famous for their double distance design, which allow the slider to travel a very long distance. But this time with the Access, Zeapon uses a more traditional design, not the double distance design. There are 2 solid carbon fiber rods as the track. The carbon fiber is beautiful, but while the track may look simple, there's now a big central control unit with a color LCD screen, lots of buttons, and it also contains the motor for the slider. But it's not just that. The central control unit also is a motorized pan head as well. With this integrated pan head, this Access slider offers you a lot more flexibility compared to a normal single axis slider. The camera no longer always has to point to the same direction, so you can make the camera points towards a subject in front of the camera, and as the slider is moving, it will keep pointing towards your subject. So this is great for shooting things like product shots or talking head videos, for example. But you can also do the opposite and have the camera pointing from one direction to the other, so you can capture a panoramic view of the scene for your time-lapse photography. Yes, the Access is also designed for photo as well as video. Zeapon has created an optional time-lapse trigger which can be used with the Access, so it gives you better control when doing time-lapse photography. There are some cheaper carbon fiber sliders. They also have a built-in motorized pan head, but most of them will just rely on a very simple mechanical gear control. So you have very limited adjustments, and also it's quite hard to get the panning action correct. But with this Access slider, you can control and fine-tune the panning action very easily using the central control unit. The central control unit is really the brain and the heart of the whole slider. It controls and powers everything. I will come back and talk about it more in a minute. So to use this Access slider, you could either put it directly on a flat surface like a desk or on the floor by unfolding the 4 adjustable feet at each corner, or you can attach it to a tripod using the tripod mount at the center of the slider. The slider also comes with 2 support rods to make the slider more stable and minimize the tilt caused by the weight shift when you move the camera to the side of the slider. Or you can use 2 tripods, one attached to each side, either at the far end or right between the end and the midpoint of the slider. Using 2 tripods would make the slider more stable and it won't tilt when the camera moves to each end of the track. With the shortest axis 80, I find it's okay if I just use 1 tripod, but if you're using the longest axis 120, especially if you use it with a very heavy camera, I would recommend you set it up with 2 tripods. There's a bubble level on the slider to help you make sure your slider is sitting nice and flat. So once you fix the slider on a desktop or a tripod, make sure the locking tab at the back of the slider is unlocked so the slider can move. Then you can choose to operate the slider in either manual mode or motorized mode. To operate it in manual mode, you just need to flick the front tab to manual position and you can now use the slider manually. It is super easy, even easier than the Micro 3 as you don't need to remove anything at all, so I really love this design. The wheels and the carbon fiber track are very nice quality, so the slide motion is very smooth. There's also a scale printed on the carbon fiber track, so you can use it to know how far you are moving the slider. However, the slider just slides freely when you push it or even tilt the slider a little bit. There is no damping at all. It's hard to move the slider at a constant speed manually. This is especially noticeable when I compare it with the Zeapon Micro 3, which is just super smooth and also has a very good damping design. So the Micro 3 just moves in a lot more consistent speed when I move it manually. Another thing I notice is that there is a bit of noise when I'm moving the slider manually. This is not an issue for me as I usually use the slider to shoot some product B-roll for my YouTube videos, so I don't need to record any audio. But if you need to capture audio at the same time, then you would capture the noise caused by the slider, so that is not ideal. So to me, even though there is a manual mode and it's super easy to use it, I think the Axis is more a motorized slider and I will only use it as a manual slider as a backup solution like when I run out of power. Okay, now let me show you how to control it in motorized mode. There are 2 ways to do that. The first method is using the central control unit. In my opinion, this is the best way and the reason why you want to buy this Zeapon Axis slider instead of any other sliders in the market. So let me do a quick overview of the central control unit first. On the front, there are 11 buttons, 1 dial and a color LCD screen. These are all you need to control the slider and the pen head and understand what is happening. If you use it outdoor and the sunlight directly shine on the display, then it may be a bit hard to see the screen, so you will need to use your hand or something to block the sunlight. But if you use it indoor, then the screen is great. It is very sharp. It displays all the information you need to know, like the speed, the battery level, and it also has a menu system for changing settings as well. I do find the text at the very top a little bit too small and I would prefer them to be slightly larger, but otherwise the layout of the screen is very sensible and it makes the slider very easy to use. To control the slider and the pen head, there are 4 directional buttons on the left to control the slider and the pen head. Single click and hold to move it, or you can double click to make it move continuously. Once you set the slider and the pen head to the position you want, just press the A button to set the start point or the A point. Then adjust the slider and pen head position to the end position and press the B button. After you set the AB point, then you can press the diamond shaped button at the bottom to play the movement. Now there's one very important thing I want to mention. It's something that completely confused me the first few days I was testing this slider. So after I set the A and then the B point, then I press the play button. The slider would move from point B back to point A. then it will stop. Alright, then I press play again. The slider would move from point A to point B and pause for a second, and then it will move back to point A again. And when the slider is moving from point A to point B, the playback speed is not what I said, and also the pen head movement does not synchronize with the slider movement. But then when it moved from point B back to point A, the speed is what I said, and the pen head movement also synced correctly with the slider. I thought there must be some bugs with the slider, as the point A to point B movement is completely not what I thought it should be. So turns out it is a user error, well, kind of. After I set the A-B point, if I look at the screen, the arrow is pointing from B to A. What it means is the slider thinks the user wants to do a point B to point A movement. So that's why when it moves from point B to point A, everything is correct. But once it reaches point A, if I press play again, it will just try to reset everything back to point B so that it can do another B to A movement. And that's why when it moves from point A to point B, the speed is just always the maximum speed, and it doesn't even try to sync the pen head movement with the slider movement, as it just wants to reset everything back to point B as quickly as possible. Personally, I think this is quite a weird design decision, as I would usually set the starting point as the point A and then set the end point as the point B, and I would like to then play from A to B, not the reverse direction. And I'm sure a lot of users will be confused by this as well. Fortunately, you just need to press the A button after you set the A-B point. Then the slider would change to A to B playback, which is what I want to do. So I just need to remember to press the A button before I press the play button. But I still don't think it is ideal, as I have to press the A button every time. I've asked Zeapon if they can change it, either change the default behavior so it's always A to B by default, or make it a setup option so user can choose what they want. But drop a comment below and let me know if you also think this is a change that you want to see, or if you think the current setup actually makes more sense so you want to keep it this way. If you want to play back in the loop, you can just press the loop button at the top before you press play. So very straightforward. You can adjust the speed using the dial at the top right, and you can set the speed between 1 to 100%. And as you are adjusting the speed, the display would also update at the same time and tell you the total time for the playback, so you can see what speed is most suitable to you. To me, this is a huge improvement compared to the Micro 3, which only have 3 different speed adjustments from the slider itself. But apart from using the buttons to set the waypoint, there is another way that is even faster. So what you need to do is just press and hold the hand button for about a second. Then you can manually move and turn the camera to the position you want as the start position. Press the A button and then move and turn the camera again to the end position. Press the B point, and now that's all you need to set up the A-B point, and you can play back. So it's super quick and easy and very intuitive, and I just love it. It just makes setup a shot so much faster and quicker, especially for someone like me who have to set up a large number of B-roll product shots every week. It really saved me a lot of time. On the left side, there is a lock button. I was a bit confused by what it does initially, as it doesn't seem to lock anything, but very soon I figured out this is to lock the pen head on the central control unit. It is a momentary design. What it means is when the unit is not powered on, you can manually use your hand to turn the pen head to adjust the pen head angle, but it does make it hard to install a tripod head and lock it securely onto the pen head. So what you can do is press and hold that lock button, and you will lock the position of the pen head. So you can install the tripod head onto the pen head and lock it tightly. By the way, the tripod screw on the pen head has that double 1/4 and 3/8 inch design like some other Zeapon product, so you can fit a tripod head with either size of this screw hole without having to use any extra adapter. You can also just press and turn that screw and hide it inside the unit, which make it easier for transportation. There are also marks on the pen head to tell you the angle of rotation. On the opposite side of the central control unit, there is a shutter cable port and a USB-C port. The USB-C port can be used to power the central control unit using a 5V 2A PD power source, and you don't even need to plug in a MPF battery at all. You just need to use a compatible PD power supply to power the slider completely. This is great if you have an indoor studio setup, so you can just use a AC PD power supply without having to worry about charging and replacing your MPF batteries. The second method of controlling the slider in motorized mode is using the Zeapon Lab app. This is the same app that you use with the Zeapon Micro 2 and Micro 3 sliders. Basically, you just first connect all your Zeapon products to the app, and then you can remote control them all and set waypoints, etc. I've previously demoed how the Zeapon Lab app works in a few of my videos, so I'm not going to repeat it again in this video. Honestly, I think if you are buying this Zeapon Access slider, you really should be using the central control unit instead of this app to control the slider, as it's just way faster and easier as well. However, there is one reason why you would want to use the app instead. Using the Zeapon Lab app, you can set up to 6 waypoints, which is more than what you can do on the central control unit, which is only 2 waypoints. The Zeapon Access slider, it has a maximum vertical payload of 4 kg or 10 kg if you run it horizontally. This is the same no matter you choose the 80, 100 or 120 access slider. I don't have any camera that is anywhere close to this weight limit, but I tried some of my heaviest setup and the access slider can handle it no problem at all. The slider's movement is very smooth, no matter you are running it at full speed or very slow speed, the movement is still very smooth. And as I mentioned before, you can adjust the speed from 1% to 100% very easily. If we compare the speed of the Access slider with the Micro 3, Micro 3's slowest setting is about 40% speed with the Access. Micro 3's medium speed is approximately 75% setting with the Access. Micro 3's fastest speed is approximately the same as Access 100% speed. I was actually hoping Access fastest speed would be a bit faster than the Micro 3. Well, I don't really need it, but I know there are users that want a faster slider. But on the other hand, having the ability to adjust the speed to whatever I want, even go down to 1%, which is really slow by the way, that is really useful for things like close-up product shots, as it usually need a slower speed, and that is one of the issue that I'm having with the Micro 3 at the moment, as even the slowest speed is still a little bit too fast for me, so I won't have this issue anymore with this Access slider. The Zeapon Access slider provides 2 axes of movement, left and right movement from the slider, and we have the pen head that rotate. But there's a Pro version which comes with an extra motorized head and extra accessories, and that will add a third axis tilt movement to the slider. This is the same tilt head from the Zeapon Pons PT system. The only difference is the arm has a slightly different design. The new one is foldable. If you have bought one previously for your Micro 2 or Micro 3 slider, then you can use it with this new Access slider as well. You just need to update the firmware to the latest version using the Zeapon Lab app before you use it. With this additional third axis movement, it does give you a lot more flexibility in terms of what you can do. To use the tilt head, you just need to go into the menu system and connect the tilt head to the slider. And once it's connected, I thought I can control the tilt head from the Axis central control unit directly, but turns out I can't. The tilt head is controlled by pressing the buttons on the tilt head itself. I found it a bit weird, and I myself would definitely want to control the tilt head from the central control unit directly. I have gave this feedback to Zeapon and they told me they will look into that. This Zeapon Axis slider is a huge departure for Zeapon. The design is very different to the previous Micro 2 and Micro 3 slider, which I'm a big fan of. So when I first received and saw the slider, I wasn't sure whether I like it or not because it's missing a lot of those design that I really like about the Micro 3 slider. The size is quite a bit bigger. The central control unit looks more complicated, and to be honest, the aesthetic design doesn't look quite as cool as the Micro 3 as well. But after using this new Axis slider for a few weeks now, I'm starting to see why Zeapon made this slider. Yes, there are a lot more buttons and dial on the Axis slider and it looks more complicated, but it actually makes it easier to control everything. There is a color LCD screen that displays the status and the menu. You no longer have to remember all those different button combinations to operate it. So I start to ask myself, is the Axis slider actually a better slider than the Micro 3? Now here is a table that I put together comparing some of the most important specs of this new Axis slider and the Micro 3 motorized slider. I saw them according to the slider's maximum travel length. One major difference is that the Axis slider have 2 axes of movement straight out of box, while Micro 3 only has 1. Axis integrated pen head is a big advantage. Especially, you can control everything from the central control unit directly. While you can add a pen head to the Micro 3, it's just a lot easier and faster with the Axis, as you don't have to rely on using your phone and set up and connect the slider and pen head to the app. As I've mentioned earlier, the size of the Axis sliders are a lot bigger, longer than the Micro 3 motorized sliders. It's because the Micro 3 slider have that Zeapon double distance design. This is a major advantage of the Micro 3 sliders. The spec also suggests the Micro 3 motorized sliders are quite a bit lighter, but remember the Micro 3 doesn't include any pen head. So if you want the pen feature, you need to buy and attach the Pons motorized pen head onto the slider, and you also need a separate battery to power the pen head as well. So if you add the weight of the pen head and even just a small NPF battery, then the weight of the motorized Micro 3 and the Axis sliders are virtually the same. In terms of maximum payload, they are both very good and quite similar. The Micro 3 slider have slightly higher payload, but remember the slider itself doesn't have a pen head, so if you add a pen head, the pen head and the additional battery would decrease the maximum payload that the Micro 3 can handle. And for the price, the Micro 3 sliders and the Axis sliders are also very similar. But once again, since the Axis already include the motorized pen head and the Micro 3 doesn't, so if you add the price of the motorized pen head to the Micro 3, then the Axis would be cheaper. One thing that is not listed on this table, but I think is also a very important thing to consider, is that with the Axis, you have the ability to adjust the speed from 1% to 100%, and that is extremely important for a lot of users. While the Micro 3 slider, using the physical control, there are only 3 speeds you can choose. So if you are someone that need to shoot in many different locations with a slider, the Micro 3 may still be the better choice for you, as it's just a lot easier to carry it around. But if you are mostly shooting in a fixed location, then this new Zeapon axis slider will give you more feature and is also much easier to operate as well.